March 17, 2024, Patagonian coast, Argentina. Marine archaeologist Dr. Elena Vargas stands on the deck of the research vessel Atlantico Sur, her thermal scanner detecting an anomaly 47 meters below the surface. The coordinates read 42 degrees 4723 S, 65 degrees 0158 W, a stretch of coastline near Golfo San Matias that official hydrographic charts describe as empty seabed. But the sonar returns tell a different story. Something metallic. Something massive. Something that shouldn't be there. The dive team descends through cold, murky water thick with sediment. At 7:21 hours, lead diver Marco Fuentes' headlamp illuminates what appears to be a rock formation. He brushes away decades of encrusted barnacles and marine growth. Beneath his gloved hand, steel emerges, riveted plates, German industrial craftsmanship, and then, unmistakably, partially obscured by corrosion but still legible, U-977. The discovery sends shockwaves through the international maritime archaeology community within hours. U-977 is not supposed to be here. According to every official record, every naval archive from Berlin to Washington, this Type VIIC U-boat surrendered to Argentine authorities in Mar del Plata on August 17, 1945, 3 months after Germany's surrender. The submarine was subsequently handed over to the United States Navy, studied extensively, and scuttled in deep Atlantic waters in November 1946 as part of Operation Deadlight. Its wreckage should be resting 800 nautical miles northeast of these coordinates, in international waters where the U.S. Navy disposed of captured German vessels. But here it sits, deliberately concealed in a narrow underwater canyon, its ballast tanks flooded in a controlled descent, its hatches sealed from the inside. Over the following 6 weeks, Dr. Vargas's team conducts systematic exploration of the wreck. On April 29, 2024, they breach the conning tower. Inside, preserved in the oxygen-deprived environment, they find what the ocean has hidden for nearly 8 decades: personal effects, navigation charts marked with routes that don't match official logs, and waterproof containers welded to the bulkheads. Inside one container, identity documents, multiple sets. German military identification for Captain Lieutenant Heinz Schaffer, dated 1943, but also Argentine residence permits under the name Hernan Schiffer, issued in 1947. Paraguayan entry visas for Heinrich Müller, dated 1949, and Chilean banking records for Hans Schmidt, showing regular deposits from 1951 to 1968. In the captain's quarters, behind a false panel that requires precise knowledge to access, investigators discover a waterproof journal. The final entry, written in German, is dated March 3, 1946. The official surrender was theater. The real cargo reached the designated coordinates. My duty is complete. History will record my death, but I will live to see my children again. The declaration creates an immediate crisis in historical records. According to every official document, Heinz Schaffer survived the war, surrendered his U-boat, returned to Germany, and lived openly in Buenos Aires until his death in 1982. His memoir, published in 1952, described his wartime service and final voyage across the Atlantic. He gave interviews. He attended naval reunions. The German government awarded him a military pension. But forensic analysis of the journal, conducted by the Argentine Federal Police and verified by international experts, confirms the handwriting matches Schaffer's authenticated wartime correspondence. The paper stock dates correctly to 1945-1946. The ink composition matches German naval-issue fountain pens from that era. More disturbing, dental records from the skeleton found in the captain's quarters, analyzed through CT scanning by the University of Buenos Aires Medical Examiner's Office, do not match Heinz Schaffer's military medical files. The man who called himself Heinz Schaffer and lived in Argentina for 37 years was someone else. The real Heinz Schaffer disappeared in March 1946. his submarine deliberately hidden in an underwater grave, his identity assumed by another man. But why? What cargo required such elaborate deception? What mission demanded a submarine commander fake his own surrender, then vanish into a steel tomb beneath the waves? And who lived as Heinz Schaffer for nearly 4 decades after the war? If you want to see what investigators found in that sealed submarine, what mission orders were hidden in those watertight containers, and how one of the most successful escape networks in history used U-977 to smuggle something so valuable, it required the death and replacement of its own commander, hit the like button and subscribe, because this story goes deeper than anyone imagined. Heinz Schaffer was born on November 2, 1921, in Flensburg, a northern German port city where the Baltic Sea meets the industrial waterfront. His father, Klaus Schaffer, commanded merchant vessels for the Hamburg-Amerika Line. His mother, Margarethe, came from a family of naval engineers. Young Heinz grew up surrounded by ship blueprints and maritime charts, learning celestial navigation before he learned algebra. By age 14, he could plot a course across the North Atlantic using only a sextant and chronometer. In April 1939, 5 months before Germany invaded Poland, Heinz Schaffer enlisted in the Kriegsmarine at 17. His aptitude scores ranked in the 98th percentile for spatial reasoning and mechanical comprehension. He entered the submarine service in January 1940, assigned to the 2nd U-boat flotilla based in Wilhelmshaven. The timing was deliberate. Germany's U-boat force was expanding rapidly, and the Kriegsmarine needed officers who understood both the technical complexity of submarine warfare and the psychological demands of underwater combat. Schaffer's first posting was aboard U-46, a Type VIIB submarine, where he served as watch officer under Kapitänleutnant Engelbert Andras, one of Germany's most decorated submarine commanders. Between February 1940 and August 1941, U-46 completed 8 war patrols, sinking 23 Allied merchant vessels totaling 143,000 gross register tons. Schaffer learned the craft of submarine warfare in the most brutal classroom imaginable, the North Atlantic convoy routes, where British destroyers hunted German U-boats with improving sonar technology and depth charges that could crush a submarine's hull like an aluminum can. On September 12, 1941, during U-46's 9th patrol, Andras noted in his official report, Watch Officer Schaffer demonstrated exceptional composure during a tower depth charge attack by British corvette HMS Gladiolus, maintained operational effectiveness throughout crew stress event. Recommend for command training. Schaffer received his own command in March 1943. U-977, a Type VIIC submarine fresh from the shipyard at Blohm and Voss in Hamburg. The vessel measured 67.1 meters in length, displaced 769 tons surfaced, and carried a crew of 44 officers and enlisted men. Its diesel engines could push it to 17 knots on the surface. Submerged, electric motors provided 7.6 knots for short durations. Armament included 5 530 torpedo tubes, 4 forward, 1 aft, and carried 14 torpedoes. A 88 deck gun and 20 anti-aircraft cannon completed its weapons suite. But U-977 specifications didn't fully capture what made it unique among Germany's submarine fleet. During its construction, engineers installed additional modifications not standard in Type VIIC boats, expanded battery capacity for extended submerged operations, reinforced pressure hull sections rated to 300 meters depth compared to the standard 200-meter rating, and enlarged fuel bunkers that increased its operational range from 8,500 nautical miles to approximately 12,000 nautical miles. These modifications were authorized by Befehlshaber der U-Boot, commander of submarines, Karl Dönitz himself, suggesting U-977 was intended for missions beyond standard convoy interdiction. Schaffer's service record from March 1943 to January 1945 shows 4 completed war patrols. The first 3 targeted Allied convoys in the North Atlantic and Arctic routes to Murmansk, achieving modest success. 6 confirmed merchant vessels sunk, totaling 34,000 tons. His 4th patrol, however, remains classified in German naval archives with only summary information available. Departing Kristiansand, Norway, on January 14, 1945, U-977 proceeded on what official logs describe as training patrol in the Norwegian Sea. The boat returned to Bergen on March 3, 1945, having reported no combat action. This 48-day patrol coincided with the collapse of Germany's strategic position. Soviet forces were advancing through Poland toward Berlin, Allied armies had crossed the Rhine, and the war's outcome was inevitable. What made Schaffer unusual among U-boat commanders wasn't just his technical competence or tactical success. Intelligence reports compiled by British Naval Intelligence Division and now declassified reveal Schaffer maintained relationships across Germany's military and political hierarchy that were extraordinary for a junior officer. His personnel file, obtained from the German Federal Archives in 2019, shows correspondence with Reichsleiter Martin Bormann's staff, documented meetings with SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, who oversaw Nazi Germany's secret weapons programs, and personal commendations from Admiral Dönitz himself. Family records paint a more human portrait. Schaffer married Anna Marie Becker on June 8, 1942 in Flensburg during a brief shore leave. Their daughter, Greta, was born May 15, 1943. Their son, Klaus, named after Heinz's father, arrived December 2, 1944. Photographs from this period, preserved by Schaffer's sister Ilse, show a young officer with intense dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, and the lean physique of someone who spent months confined in steel tubes beneath the ocean. Letters between Heinz and Anna Marie, archived at the German Maritime Museum in Bremerhaven, reveal emotional depth beneath the military professionalism. In a letter dated October 7, 1944, Schaffer wrote, "I have seen things in this war that make me question whether any nation, including our own, fights on the side of righteousness. But I fight for you and the children, not for flags or ideologies. Whatever orders come, whatever the Kriegsmarine demands, my only true mission is to ensure you survive what is coming." That letter proves prophetic in horrifying ways. On February 13, 1945, while U-977 was at sea during its mysterious 4th patrol, Allied bombers attacked Dresden in a series of raids that created a firestorm consuming the city center. Among the thousands of civilian casualties, Anna Marie Schaffer, 24 years old, and both children, Greta, 21 months, and Klaus, 10 weeks, killed when the apartment building where they were staying collapsed during the second wave of bombing. Anna Marie had traveled to Dresden to visit her mother, who also perished in the raid. The official death notification reached U-977 via encrypted radio transmission on February 17, 1945. According to testimony from U-977 crew member Johann Hartmann, interviewed by German historians in 1978, Schaffer received the message while the submarine was submerged at 90 meters depth. He read it once, folded the paper precisely, placed it in his jacket pocket, and said only, "Continue present heading." Maintained silent running. He didn't mention his family's death to the crew for 3 days. But a man who served under Schaffer, machinist's mate Werner Koch, later told investigators something that suggested the commander's response went far deeper than stoic silence. In declassified testimony to U.S. Naval Intelligence in September 1945, Koch stated, "After the Captain Lieutenant received that message, something changed in him. Not rage, not grief you could see, something colder, like he decided something. Within a week, we received new orders that came through a communication channel I'd never seen us use before. Not standard naval frequencies. When I asked our radio operator about it, he told me to forget I'd noticed. Those new orders, whatever they contained, would set in motion a deception that lasted 80 years. By April 1945, Germany's military situation was terminal. U-boat bases along the French Atlantic coast had been captured. Shipyards in Hamburg and Kiel lay in ruins under Allied bombing. The Kriegsmarine surface fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants hiding in Norwegian fjords. Submarines still at sea faced impossible choices: surrender to approaching Allied forces, scuttle their boats and hope for mercy, or flee to neutral nations and face internment. Admiral Dönitz, who assumed leadership of Germany after Hitler's suicide on April 30, 1945, issued clear orders. All U-boats were to cease offensive operations and either proceed to Allied ports for surrender or surface and signal their position. On May 4, 1945, Dönitz ordered all submarines to surface, broadcast surrender signals on international frequencies, and fly black flags. Most U-boat commanders complied. Between May 5 and May 8, 1945, 156 U-boats surrendered to Allied forces. Another 221 were scuttled by their crews in harbors from Norway to the Baltic. The official record shows that by June 1945, the U-boat war was over. But U-977's radio remained silent. According to official German naval logs, maintained by the Oberkommando der Marine Naval High Command, and now stored in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, U-977's last reported position was logged on May 2, 1945. Coordinates 58 degrees 12 N, 06 degrees 45 W, approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of Bergen, Norway. The boat reported mechanical issues requiring surface transit for repairs. Then silence. The official historical record states that U-977, unable to return to occupied ports and unwilling to surrender, fled across the Atlantic. The boat allegedly surfaced off Mar del Plata, Argentina, on August 17, 1945, 108 days after Germany's surrender, one of the last U-boats to capitulate. Argentine authorities interned the crew, and the submarine was later transferred to U.S. custody. But that version of events, accepted by historians for nearly 8 decades, conceals something far more complex. What investigators discovered in that underwater canyon off Patagonia proves the official story was constructed carefully, deliberately, with the cooperation of intelligence services on multiple continents. Because the real U-977, the steel tomb found in 2024, tells a different story. And the man who emerged from the submarine in Argentina, who lived for decades as Heinz Schaffer, was part of an escape network that moved people, gold, and secrets across oceans, while the world believed the war was over. The critical question isn't whether Schaffer survived. It's what he was transporting that was valuable enough to require his own disappearance. May 2, 1945, Norwegian Sea, 58 degrees 12 north, 06 degrees 45 west. U-977 cuts through black water under overcast skies that hide the moon and stars. The submarine runs on the surface, diesel engines driving it southwest at 14 knots. In the conning tower, Schaffer stands watch with his executive officer, Oberleutnant Zur C. Friedrich Steinfeld. Neither man speaks. Around them, the war is ending. Radio intercepts over the past 72 hours have painted the picture clearly. Soviet forces are inside Berlin. Hitler is either dead or dying in his bunker, and Admiral Dönitz has assumed command of whatever remains of the German state. At 23:47 hours, the radio operator, Funkmacht Hans Weber, climbs the ladder to the bridge. He carries a message flimsy, the thin paper used for encrypted communications. Schaffer reads it by red flashlight, careful not to destroy his night vision. The message originates not from Naval High Command in Flensburg, but from a cipher group Schaffer has been monitoring since February. ADRN-04, a communication channel established by SS Obergruppenführer Heinz Kammler's Special Projects Division. The message is brief. Valkyrie protocol active, coordinates confirmed, cargo prepared for transfer, proceed staging point Oslo, authorization, BORMANN personal. Schaffer passes the message to Steinfeld without comment. His executive officer reads it twice, then looks at his commander with an expression that mixes confusion and dawning horror. "Sir," Steinfeld says quietly, "Naval Command ordered all boats to—" "I'm aware of Dernitz's surrender orders," Schaffer interrupts. "This supersedes them." "Sir, the war is over. We can reach Scotland in 3 days. The British will." "The British will hang me as a war criminal for following orders I had no choice but to obey," Schaffer says flatly. "And they'll never release me to see what remains of my family. If there's any possibility Anna Marie's mother survived Dresden, any chance her sisters made it through the Soviet advance, I need to be alive and free to find them." It's a lie. Schaffer knows Anna Marie's entire family died in the firestorm, but it's the kind of lie his executive officer needs to hear, motivation that sounds like duty and grief, rather than the cold calculation that's actually driving him. Steinfeld hesitates, then nods. "What are your orders, sir?" "Come about to course 175. All ahead 2/3. Take us to Oslo." May 3, 1945, 6:15 hours. Approaches to Oslo Fjord, Norway. U-977 runs submerged at periscope depth, electric motors pushing it at 4 knots through waters crowded with German vessels fleeing south. Through the periscope, Schaffer counts 8 ships, 2 destroyers, 4 merchant vessels, and what appears to be a headquarters ship loaded with personnel. All flying white flags, all broadcasting surrender signals. U-977 slips past them like a predator among prey, following navigation instructions that guide it to a position 3 nautical miles north of Oscarsborg Fortress. At 6:43 hours, Schaffer orders the submarine to hover at 40 meters depth. They wait. At 7:20 hours, the radio receiver picks up a short-range transmission on a frequency reserved for harbor control. Fishing vessel Morgenstern departing slip 7. 1 passenger. Expected transit time 30 minutes. Schaffer orders U-977 to periscope depth. Through the optics, he watches a small fishing boat, maybe 15 meters long, diesel-powered, showing rust and weather damage consistent with years of hard use, motor out from Oslo's commercial docks. It proceeds directly toward U-977's position without the wandering path of a vessel actually fishing. At 7:54 hours, the fishing boat stops. A man emerges from the cabin. He's wearing civilian clothes, dark wool coat, hat pulled low, and carries 2 waterproof cases, each approximately 1 meter long and 40 centimeters wide. He waves in U-977's direction. "Surface the boat," Schaffer orders. U-977 rises from the depths, water cascading from its conning tower. Crew members scramble topside with lines. The fishing boat comes alongside. The man with the cases doesn't speak German or Norwegian. He speaks Spanish with an accent that Schaffer's limited language skills can't quite place. The man hands over both cases, then produces a sealed envelope which he gives directly to Schaffer. The entire transfer takes 4 minutes. At 7:58 hours, the fishing boat departs. At 8:01 hours, U-977 crashes dives to 90 meters and turns onto course 255, almost due west, heading for the North Atlantic. In his cabin, Schaffer opens the envelope. Inside, detailed navigation charts marked with waypoints across the Atlantic, coordinates for 3 rendezvous points, recognition signals, and most critically, identity documents. German military identification for himself and 16 crew members, but with altered dates of birth and service records. Also, Argentine residence permits, already completed except for entry stamps. and a typed list of names, his crew's names with notation beside each. Approved for transport or remain with vessel. The bottom of the envelope, a black and white photograph. 3 people, professional studio portrait. A man who could be Schaffer's twin, same sharp features, same lean build, same dark hair, though this man's eyes are slightly wider set and his jaw fractionally heavier. Beside him, a woman and young girl. On the back, written in neat script, "Your family awaits in San Carlos de Bariloche. They will know nothing until you arrive. Documentary identity established 1942. Complete background prepared." Schaffer stares at the photograph for 11 minutes. Then he places it in his personal safe along with the envelope and goes to examine the waterproof cases. Each case, when opened, contains gold, not coins, not jewelry, refined bars, each stamped with Nazi Party eagles and serial numbers. 40 bars in each case, each bar weighing 1 kilogram. 80 kilograms of gold total, approximately 2,570 troy ounces. At May 1945 prices, worth roughly $90,000. In 2024 values, over $5 million. But the gold isn't for him. Tucked between the bars, a manifest. The gold is to be delivered to specific banking contacts in Buenos Aires with account numbers and authentication codes. It's operational funding for something larger than one submarine commander's escape. May 4th, 1945, 1400 hours. North Atlantic, 200 nautical miles west of Ireland. Dernitz's surrender order comes through on standard naval frequencies. All U-boats cease offensive operations immediately. Surface, fly black flag, broadcast position on international distress frequency, and proceed to designated Allied ports for surrender. Schaffer convenes a meeting with his officers in the forward torpedo room. All 4 are present. Steinfeld, the executive officer, Lieutenant Zur C. Klaus Hartmann, the engineering officer, Oberfähnrich Zur C. Otto Brandt, the torpedo officer, and Lieutenant Martin Fischer, the navigator. "Gentlemen," Schaffer begins, "Germany has surrendered. The war is over. You all heard the order to surface and capitulate." The officers nod. The tension in the compartment is suffocating. "I'm offering you a choice," Schaffer continues. "We can surface, surrender to the nearest British or American vessel, and spend the next several years in prisoner-of-war camps while they decide whether to prosecute us for war crimes. Or we can proceed with alternative orders I received from higher authority, orders issued before the surrender, orders that remain valid regardless of Dernitz's capitulation." "What orders, sir?" Hartmann asks. "Transit to Argentina. We have contacts there, resources, and support network. The boat and crew will be interned, which is preferable to British prison camps. More importantly, we can ensure the crew's families receive support after we're released." It's another lie, or rather, a partial truth. Some of the crew will indeed reach Argentina, but not aboard U-977, not the U-977 that arrives in Mar del Plata in August. "There's significant risk," Schaffer admits. "The Atlantic transit will be dangerous. We'll need to avoid Allied anti-submarine patrols for at least 90 days. Provisions will be tight, but the alternative is immediate imprisonment with uncertain duration." Steinfeld speaks carefully. "Sir, if we don't surrender, they'll classify us as fugitives, pirates even. The protections of honorable surrender won't apply." "I'm aware," Schaffer says. "That's why I'm making this a choice. Any man who wants to surface and surrender can transfer to another U-boat we'll encounter in 2 days, U-530, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Otto Wermuth. He's proceeding to Mar del Plata under similar orders. Men who transfer will still reach Argentina, just on a different boat, with a commander who will surrender immediately upon arrival." This is the critical deception. Schaffer is offering his crew an escape that looks like following orders, while actually splitting his personnel for reasons they can't yet understand. Over the next 18 hours, individual crew members approach Schaffer with their decisions. Of U-977's 44-man crew, 16 choose to transfer to U-530. Significantly, these include the men whose identities appear in the envelope from Oslo, the men for whom false documents have been prepared. May 6, 1945, 3:30 hours. Mid-Atlantic, approximately 52 degrees N, 25 degrees W. U-977 rendezvous with U-530 in darkness. Both submarines surface. Transfer boats ferry 16 men from U-977 to U-530, along with one of the waterproof cases containing 40 kilograms of gold. Schaffer personally briefs Captain Lieutenant Otto Wermuth, a briefing that takes 22 minutes and occurs entirely in the privacy of U-530's captain's cabin. No record exists of what Schaffer told Wermuth, but what follows suggests they reached an agreement that ensured both boats served the same larger operation. At 4:20 hours, the submarines separate. U-530 proceeds southwest toward Argentina on a course that will bring it to Mar del Plata on July 10, 1945, where it will surrender, its crew will be interned, and one man claiming to be Heinz Schaffer will eventually be released to build a life in South America. The real U-977, now operating with only 28 crew members, turns onto course 185, heading almost due south, but with a westward component that will take it far from standard Atlantic shipping lanes. May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe ends officially at 23:01 hours Central European Time. Around the world, celebrations erupt. In Germany, millions face the devastation of total defeat. The Kriegsmarine ceases to exist as a fighting force. U-977 continues south, running submerged during daylight, surfacing at night to charge batteries and ventilate the boat. Schaffer drives his crew through a punishing routine: 4 hours on watch, 4 hours maintenance, 4 hours sleep. The submarine becomes a steel purgatory of exhaustion, recycled air, and the constant anxiety of discovery. June 4, 1945. South Atlantic, 15 degrees south, 28 degrees west. U-977 has traveled nearly 5,000 nautical miles from Norway. Provisions are critically low. Diesel fuel is at 23% capacity. The crew is haggard, moving through their duties with the mechanical precision of men too tired to think. Schaffer orders the boat to periscope depth and spends 40 minutes scanning the horizon. At 12:47 hours, he sights what he's been searching for: a merchant vessel, approximately 8,000 tons, flying the flag of Portugal, a neutral nation. The ship's profile matches specifications from the documents he received in Oslo: a refrigerated cargo vessel named Santa Maria, operating between Lisbon and Buenos Aires. U-977 surfaces. Schaffer signals the merchant ship using an Aldi's lamp, flashing a recognition code: 3 shorts, 2 longs, 1 short. After an agonizing 5-minute wait, the Santa Maria responds: 2 longs, 3 shorts. The merchant ship heaves to. Over the next 3 hours, U-977's crew transfers supplies: fuel, oil, fresh water, provisions, and critically mail. The Santa Maria's crew lowers cargo nets filled with food, cigarettes, and sealed bags of letters, correspondence from families in Germany, smuggled through underground networks, addressed to men who officially don't exist anymore. Schaffer pays for the supplies with gold, 4 bars from the remaining case, handed over to the Santa Maria's captain, a Portuguese named Antonio Sousa, who asks no questions and records nothing in his ship's log. The transfer is completed by 1600 hours. The Santa Maria resumes course to Buenos Aires. U-977 submerges and continues south. July 22, 1945, 200 hours. Approaches to Golfo San Matias, Argentina. After 81 days at sea since departing Norway, U-977 reaches the coordinates specified in Schaffer's sealed orders: 42 degrees 4723 S, 65 degrees 0158 W. The submarine runs on the surface through darkness, approaching a stretch of coastline that appears, even through binoculars and periscope, completely desolate. Rocky cliffs rise 40 meters above the waterline. No lights, no settlements. No indication anyone has ever set foot here. But the navigation charts show something different. A narrow underwater canyon, created by tectonic faulting, extending perpendicular to the coast. The canyon's mouth is only 25 meters wide, barely enough for a submarine to enter, but it descends to 90 meters depth and extends nearly 400 meters inland. Schaffer orders slow ahead. U-977 noses into the canyon like a predator returning to its lair. The submarine's sonar pings back echoes from rock walls just meters on either side. Visibility, even with searchlights, extends maybe 20 meters through sediment-heavy water. At 2:47 hours, 200 meters into the canyon, Schaffer orders all stop. The submarine hovers in absolute darkness, surrounded by rock walls that shield it from the open ocean. "This is the end of our voyage," Schaffer announces over the boat's intercom system. His voice is calm, almost gentle. "We've traveled 11,000 kilometers from Norway to this position. Our mission is complete. What happens next requires your trust in my command." From the forward torpedo room to the stern engine compartment, 27 men, Schaffer plus his remaining crew, listen in confusion and growing anxiety. "On deck," Schaffer orders. "All crew topside immediately. Bring personal effects only. We're abandoning ship." March 18, 2024, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Dr. Elena Vargas sits across a polished conference table from Dr. Heinrich Müller, Chief of Historical Archives for the German Maritime Museum, and Commander James Patterson of the U.S. Naval History and Heritage Command. Between them, high-resolution photographs of U-977's conning tower, the waterproof containers, and the documents recovered from the submarine's interior. The mood is tense. "Let me be clear about what we're claiming," Vargas says, her English carrying a slight Argentine accent. "The submarine we found is definitively U-977. The hull number matches. The configuration matches construction records from Blohm and Voss. Metallurgical analysis of steel samples confirms German industrial processes from 1940 to 1943. This is not speculation." "We don't dispute the submarine's identity," Commander Patterson replies. "What we dispute is your conclusion that Heinz Schaffer died aboard it. The historical record is unambiguous. Schaffer surrendered in Argentina, was interviewed extensively by U.S. naval intelligence, and lived in Buenos Aires until 1982. I personally reviewed the debriefing transcripts." "Then explain the journal," Vargas says, sliding a photograph across the table. It shows a page from the waterproof journal, German text clearly visible. "Forensic document analysis by 3 independent laboratories confirms this was written by Heinz Schaffer. The handwriting matches authenticated samples from 1942 through 1945. The paper stock is correct. The ink chemistry is correct. And the content explicitly states he intended to disappear." Dr. Müller, a meticulous man in his 60s with steel-rimmed glasses, examines the photograph with the intensity of someone whose entire historical understanding is crumbling. "The handwriting analysis could be flawed," he says, but his tone suggests he doesn't believe his own objection. "Graphology isn't foolproof." "Then explain the skeleton," Vargas counters. On April 30th, 2024, after 6 weeks of careful excavation, Vargas's team recovered human remains from U-977's captain's quarters. The skeleton was remarkably well preserved, protected from complete decomposition by the oxygen-depleted environment and cold water temperature. Preliminary examination identified the remains as male, approximately 25-30 years old at time of death, height estimated at 178-180 centimeters. The critical evidence came from dental analysis. Dr. Gabriela Sanchez, chief medical examiner for Buenos Aires province, compared the skull's dental structure to two sets of records. First, Heinz Schaffer's military medical files from 1943, stored in the German Federal Archives. Second, dental X-rays from Heinz Schaffer, obtained from an Argentine dentist who treated the man claiming that identity in the 1960s. Dr. Sanchia's report, dated May 15, 2024, is unequivocal. The dental morphology of the remains recovered from U-977 does not match the dental records of Heinz Schaffer from German military service. The subject recovered from the submarine exhibits distinct differences in molar cusp patterns, incisor alignment, and third molar development. However, the remains show striking similarities to partial dental records associated with SS Hauptsturmführer Wilhelm Bernhard, reported missing in action during the Battle of Berlin, April 1945. The revelation triggers immediate investigation across 3 continents. The German Federal Intelligence Service, Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, opens classified archives. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency releases previously sealed files from Operation Paperclip and its related investigations into Nazi escape networks. The Argentine National Archives provides access to immigration records from 1945-1950. What emerges is a portrait of sophisticated deception involving multiple intelligence services, all of whom apparently knew or suspected that the official story was false, yet chose not to expose it. June 3, 2024, Freiburg, Germany, Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv. Researcher Anna Kellerman discovers a file that wasn't supposed to exist, cataloged as Personnel Records Miscellaneous 1944-1945. The folder contains discharge papers, casualty notifications, and routine administrative documents from the war's final months, but tucked between pages, as though deliberately concealed yet preserved for future discovery. A 3-page memorandum dated April 28, 1945. The memo originates from SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler's staff, addressed to Reichsleiter Martin Bormann. The subject line reads, Valkyrie Protocol, Asset Deployment Phase III. The document is chilling in its bureaucratic precision. Transportation assets have been secured for primary evacuation routes. U-977, Schaffer, and U-530, Wehrmuth, confirmed for southern route. U-977 will transport Type IV cargo to staging coordinates 42 degrees 47, 65 degrees 01 W. Transfer protocols established with Argentine contacts, Network Aquila. U-977 crew reduction required to accommodate cargo volume. Substitute Commander, BRNHARDT, W, SS Hauptsturmführer, DOB 14031920, has undergone identity preparation and will assume Schaffer identity post-transfer. Schaffer to remain with primary cargo for security until retrieval operations complete. The memo continues with technical details, rendezvous coordinates, communication protocols, and most ominously, a list of Type IV cargo specifications. 11 containers, each 180 cm x 60 cm x 60 cm, total weight approximately 400 kg, contents classified under Valkyrie special handling. Anna Kellerman photographs every page, noting that the paper shows no signs of water damage. Aging is consistent with 80-year-old documents, and the typewriter font matches standard SS administrative machines from 1945. She submits the documents to the BND for authentication. June 19, 2024. The BND's forensic laboratory confirms the memo is genuine. The paper stock matches German wartime production. The typewriter impressions align with machines used in SS headquarters. Most significantly, the signature on the memo, Martin Bormann's distinctive scrawl, matches authenticated examples from other documents. The revelation transforms the investigation from historical curiosity to international incident. If the memo is accurate, U-977 wasn't simply a submarine fleeing to Argentina with defeated crew members. It was a transport vehicle for classified cargo, Type IV, whatever that designation means, and Heinz Schaffer's role was to deliver that cargo, then deliberately disappear to maintain the operation's secrecy. But what was the cargo? July 8, 2024, Golfo San Matías, Argentina. Vargas's team returns to the underwater canyon with specialized equipment, a remotely operated vehicle ROV, fitted with ground-penetrating sonar and a robotic arm capable of excavating sediment. The goal: search the seabed around U-977 for the 11 containers referenced in Borman's memo. The search takes 3 weeks. The canyon's floor is covered with decades of accumulated sediment, marine debris, and rock fall from the surrounding cliffs. The team methodically grids the area, using the ROV to scan each square meter. On July 29, 2024, the sonar detects anomalies, regular, geometric shapes buried under 2.3 meters of sediment, approximately 80 meters from U-977's bow. Over the following 4 days, the ROV carefully excavates the area, using pressurized water jets to remove sediment without damaging what lies beneath. What they uncover stops Vargas mid-breath: metal containers, exactly as described in the memo. Each measures approximately 180 centimeters long, 60 centimeters wide, 60 centimeters deep. The containers are constructed from welded steel with rubber gaskets, designed to be watertight. Each is marked with stenciled numbers, VIV001 through VIV011. The team brings the first container to the surface on August 2, 2024. It weighs 218 kilograms. On deck, they use cutting torches to breach the seal. Inside, packed in oiled cloth, documents, thousands of pages, blueprints, technical manuals, research reports, all in German. Dr. Klaus Werner, a specialist in Nazi-era documentation from the Technical University of Berlin, examines the contents over the next 2 weeks. His preliminary assessment, submitted to international authorities on August 18, 2024, confirms what investigators feared. The documents relate to Germany's secret weapons programs, V-2 rocket specifications, jet engine designs, research into advanced submarine propulsion, early computer development, and most disturbing, detailed documentation of medical experiments conducted in concentration camps. This isn't random material someone grabbed while fleeing, Werner explains during a press conference in Buenos Aires on August 20, 2024. This collection is curated. Someone selected specific documents, organized them by subject, and prepared them for transport. This was intelligence material, technical knowledge, the Nazi leadership intended to trade for protection in post-war negotiations. The remaining 10 containers yield similar contents. 7 more containers of documents covering nuclear research, chemical weapons, ballistics, and aeronautics. 3 containers holding physical artifacts, prototype components, experimental materials, and testing equipment. But one container, VIV009, contains something else entirely: personal files. Dossiers on individuals, Nazi officials, SS officers, scientists, engineers. Each dossier includes biographical data, photographs, fingerprints, samples of handwriting, dental records, blood type information, and detailed personality assessments. There are 127 dossiers in total. One dossier stands out: Wilhelm Bernhardt, SS Hauptsturmführer, born March 14, 1920 in Heidelberg. Height 179 cm, hair dark brown, eyes brown, education, University of Heidelberg, degree in mechanical engineering. SS service 1939-19 for 5, assigned to Kammler's Special Projects Division, primarily logistics and transportation security. The dossier includes 12 photographs showing Bernhardt from various angles: frontal, profile, three-quarter view. The resemblance to Heinz Schaffer is uncanny. Not identical, but close enough that with minor alterations, different hairstyles, slight weight change, Bernhardt could plausibly claim Schaffer's identity, especially in a foreign country where no one had previously met the real Schaffer. Most telling, the dossier includes a handwritten note dated March 15, 1945. Subject selected for Valkyrie replacement protocol. Physical match adequate. Submarine training completed April 26, 1945. U-boat school Neustadt. Briefed on Schaffer biography, mannerisms, family history. Subject understands mission terminates upon arrival Argentina. Argentine contacts notified of substitution. The implications cascade like depth charges. The Nazi leadership, knowing defeat was inevitable, prepared elaborate escape networks not just for personnel but for intelligence assets, documents and technology they believed could be traded for sanctuary or used to rebuild power structures in exile. They selected individuals like Wilhelm Bernhardt, provided them with false identities based on real military officers, and arranged for those officers to conveniently die in circumstances where bodies wouldn't be recoverable. Heinz Schaffer wasn't supposed to survive the war. He was supposed to deliver the cargo, then remain silent in his steel tomb, while Wilhelm Bernhardt lived out a comfortable exile in Argentina using Schaffer's name and identity. September 5, 2024, Washington, D.C. CIA Headquarters, Langley. The United States government declassifies 1,247 pages of documents related to Operation Safe Haven, a World War II-era program designed to track Nazi assets and prevent their use in post-war activities. Among the declassified materials, debriefing transcripts from interviews with Heinz Schaffer, conducted by U.S. Naval Intelligence in September 1945. Dr. Robert Chen, a forensic linguist from Georgetown University, analyzes the transcripts using modern computational methods that compare vocabulary usage, grammatical patterns, and speech rhythms. His conclusion, published in the Journal of Historical Linguistics in October 2024, the individual interviewed in 1945 as Heinz Schaffer demonstrates linguistic patterns inconsistent with Northern German dialect typical of Flensburg natives. Instead, the subject exhibits vocabulary and syntax more consistent with Southwestern German dialects, particularly the Rhine-Neckar region around Heidelberg, Wilhelm Bernhardt's birthplace. More damning, when U.S. Naval Intelligence asked Schaffer detailed technical questions about submarine operations, his answers were competent but generic, exactly what someone who completed a rushed 4-week training course might provide, rather than the nuanced expertise expected from a commander with 2 years of combat experience. The interrogators noted in their reports that Schaffer seemed oddly detached when discussing his family's death in Dresden, Chen points out. At the time, they attributed this to trauma, but viewed through the lens of the substitution theory, it makes perfect sense. Bernhardt was describing a tragedy that hadn't happened to his family. He was reciting a cover story, not recounting genuine grief. October 12, 2024, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The investigation expands to trace Wilhelm Bernhardt's life in Argentina from 1945 to his death in 1982. Argentine immigration records show Heinz Schaffer entering the country on August 17, 1945, aboard U-530, not U-977, confirming the substitution. He was initially interned at a facility in Paso de los Libres, then released in December 1946. Property records show Schaffer purchased a home in San Carlos de Bariloche in April 1947, a picturesque mountain town in Argentina's Lake District, popular with German immigrants. Banking records, obtained through judicial order, reveal regular deposits from Swiss accounts between 1948 and 1968, consistent with payments from hidden Nazi assets. Most intriguing, marriage records. On June 8, 1948, Heinz Schaffer married Erika Hoffmann, a German immigrant who arrived in Argentina in December 1946. Photographs from the wedding, preserved in local archives, show the bride, groom, and a young girl, approximately 5 years old, identified in captions as Schaffer's daughter from a previous marriage. Investigators tracked down descendants. Erica died in 1995, but the daughter, Greta Schaffer, now 81 years old, is alive, living in Cordoba, Argentina. On October 30, 2024, investigators interview Greta. The conversation, recorded with her permission, is heartbreaking. "I always knew something wasn't quite right," Greta says in Spanish, her voice trembling. "My father, the man I called father, would sometimes hesitate when I asked about Germany. He told me my mother and infant brother died in Dresden, that I survived because I was with relatives in the countryside. But I have no memories of Germany. None. And when I asked for details, what our house looked like, what my mother's favorite foods were, he would change the subject." DNA testing, conducted by the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team in November 2024, confirms that Greta is not genetically related to the skeleton recovered from U-977, the real Heinz Schaffer. She is, however, a genetic match to blood samples recovered from Wilhelm Bernhardt's SS medical records. "Everything I believed about my identity was a lie," Greta says during a follow-up interview on November 15, 2024. "The man who raised me wasn't Heinz Schaffer. He was an SS officer named Wilhelm Bernhardt, and I wasn't his daughter from a previous marriage. I was the daughter he had with his actual wife before the war, a wife whose existence was erased so he could assume a false identity." The revelation destroys Greta's understanding of her own history, but it also provides the final confirmation. The substitution was real, comprehensive, and successful for nearly 80 years. December 10, 2024, International Conference on Nazi Escape Networks, Tel Aviv, Israel. Historians, forensic investigators, and intelligence analysts from 14 countries convened to present findings about the Schaffer case and its implications for understanding how Nazi war criminals escaped justice. Dr. Elena Vargas presents the complete timeline, supported by physical evidence, documentary records, and DNA analysis. The conclusion is inescapable. At least 127 individuals, the number of dossiers found in container VIV-009, were part of a systematic identity replacement program. Real military officers, particularly submarine commanders and Luftwaffe pilots whose deaths could plausibly occur without recoverable bodies, were identified. SS personnel with similar physical characteristics were selected and trained to assume those identities. The real officers were then tasked with transporting cargo to remote locations, where they would remain, often dying from exposure, starvation, or, as in Schaffer's case, remaining as guardians, while their replacements lived comfortably in South America, the Middle East, or other safe havens. "The efficiency is horrifying," states Dr. Miriam Feldstein, director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Nazi War Crimes Documentation Project. "They didn't just create false identities from whole cloth. They hijacked real identities from men who could no longer contradict the impersonation. It was identity theft on a scale we're only now beginning to understand." The question that haunts investigators: how many other submarines lie hidden in remote locations, their commanders entombed inside while imposters lived out their lives using stolen names? January 15, 2025. Cross-referencing the dossiers found in U-977's cargo with post-war immigration records from Argentina, Paraguay, Chile, Brazil, Syria, and Egypt reveals a network of stunning scope. Of the 127 individuals documented in the Valkyrie dossiers, investigators positively identify 89 who entered various countries between August 1945 and December 1947. Each entered using an identity borrowed from a legitimate German military officer who was officially listed as killed in action, missing, or lost at sea. The network operated through a sophisticated system of safe houses, document forgers, and corrupt officials across multiple continents. Research compiled by Dr. Uki Goni, an Argentine historian specializing in Nazi escape routes, identifies the key components. Operating from Oslo and Bergen, this cell provided the initial staging for submarines departing on special operations. The fishing vessel Morgenstern, which transferred cargo to U-977 on May 3, 1945, was registered to Sverre Hagen, a Norwegian merchant who maintained covert relationships with German intelligence throughout the war. Norwegian police files, declassified in 2020, show Hagen was investigated in 1946 for collaboration activities, but was never prosecuted due to insufficient evidence that mysteriously disappeared from police custody in August 1946. The Norwegian network provided supplies, fuel, and communications relay services for submarines fleeing south. At least 6 U-boats are documented as receiving support from this network between May 2nd and May 10th, 1945. Neutral Portuguese and Spanish merchant vessels operating between Europe and South America served as mobile supply depots. Submarines would rendezvous with these ships at prearranged coordinates, receive provisions, transfer cargo, and exchange communications. The Santa Maria, which supplied U-977 on June 4, 1945, made 11 such rendezvous during 1945, according to reconstructed logs from Portuguese maritime archives. Captain Antonio Sousa received payment in gold, over 100 kilograms total across all transactions, worth approximately $3.5 million in 1945 currency, equivalent to roughly $60 million today. Sousa died in 1968. His descendants, interviewed by investigators in December 2024, discovered a safe deposit box in Lisbon containing 23 gold bars stamped with Nazi insignia, evidence their grandfather never spent all of his wartime profits. The most sophisticated component of the escape network operated inside Argentina, with the knowledge and cooperation of elements within the Argentine government. President Juan Perón, who took office in June 1946, maintained complex relationships with European fascist movements and saw value in welcoming German technical experts, even those with dubious wartime records. Documents recovered from Argentine National Archives, declassified following the U-977 discovery, reveal an organization called Cámara Argentina Alemana, Argentine-German Chamber, ostensibly a business association, actually functioned as reception infrastructure for escaped Nazis. The Cámara maintained safe houses in Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Mendoza, and San Carlos de Bariloche. These properties provided temporary accommodation for new arrivals while they obtained permanent residence papers, established cover identities, and integrated into German immigrant communities. Financial records show the Cámara received substantial funding from Swiss bank accounts controlled by Martin Bormann's staff, over 8 million Swiss francs between 1945 and 1952, equivalent to approximately $2 million USD then, or $28 million in 2024 values. At the network's core was a sophisticated forgery operation producing identity documents, birth certificates, baptismal records, university diplomas, professional credentials, and military discharge papers. The operation was centered in Genoa, Italy, operating from a Vatican-owned property under the protection of certain Catholic clergy who believed they were helping anti-communist Germans escape Soviet persecution. The Genoa office, as intelligence documents refer to it, processed over 5,000 identity packages between 1945 and 1950. Each package contained a complete false identity with backstory supporting documents spanning multiple years, reference letters from fictitious employers or colleagues, and a legend, a detailed narrative the recipient could memorize to maintain their cover. Wilhelm Bernhardt's transformation into Heinz Schaffer would have required one such package, customized with naval service records, family history, and personal details that would allow him to convince anyone, including U.S. intelligence officers, that he was the real submarine commander. Following the money reveals how the network sustained itself financially. Nazi officials spent the war's final months looting their own government's resources, gold reserves from the Reichsbank, assets seized from Holocaust victims, funds from various Nazi party organizations, and valuables stolen from occupied territories. This wealth was consolidated and transferred to Swiss banks using a complex system of shell accounts, front companies, and coded transactions. Recent analysis by the Swiss Federal Banking Commission, published January 2025, identifies at least 347 accounts established between January 1944 and May 1945 that served as funding sources for post-war escape networks. Total value, approximately 400 million Swiss francs, roughly $93 million USD in 1945, equivalent to $1.5 billion in 2024 values. These accounts funded safe houses, bribed officials, purchased property, and provided living expenses for escaped Nazis for decades. Martin Bormann controlled access to these accounts through a system of authentication codes and physical tokens, small metal discs, each with unique serial numbers, that served as authorization keys. One such disc was recovered from U-977's captain's quarters, disc number BN1127, which investigators matched to Swiss banking record showing it authorized access to 3 accounts totaling 2.4 million Swiss francs. Reconstructing the entire journey from Norwegian fjords to Argentine hiding places reveals the network's operational sophistication. Phase 1. Departure May 24, 1945. U-977 receives classified orders in Norwegian Sea. Proceeds to Oslo for cargo and passenger transfer. Receives gold, documents, cargo containers, and Wilhelm Bernhardt. Embarks on Atlantic transit while official surrender orders are issued. Phase 2. Atlantic transit, May 4–June 4, 1945. Crosses North Atlantic submerged during daylight. Avoids Allied anti-submarine patrols through careful navigation. Rendezvous with supply vessel Santa Maria at 15 degrees S, 28 degrees W. Receives provision, fuel, and communications from Argentine contacts. Phase 3. Crew split May 6, 1945. Rendezvous with U-530 Mid-Atlantic. Transfers 16 crew members who will accompany Wilhelm Bernhardt. These men receive false documents and briefing on cover story. U-530 proceeds to Mar del Plata for official surrender on July 10th. U-977 continues to final destination with reduced crew. Phase 4, final approach, June 4–July 22, 1945. U-977 continues south along South American coast. Maintains radio silence to avoid detection. Uses celestial navigation exclusively. No radio signals that could be direction finding. Approaches Argentine coast at night. Phase 5, cargo offload and concealment, July 22–30, 1945. U-977 enters underwater canyon at Golfo San Matias. Crew offloads 11 cargo containers using inflatable raft. Containers are weighted and sunk at designated coordinates. Crew evacuates submarine via prepositioned fishing vessels. Schaffer and skeleton crew, estimated 46 men, remain with submarine. Phase 6, integration, August–December 1945. Wilhelm Bernhardt, now Heinz Schaffer, arrives in Mar del Plata aboard U-530. Undergoes pro forma interrogation by Argentine authorities. U.S. Naval Intelligence interviews him without detecting substitution. Releases him from internment in December 1946. Bernhardt moves to San Carlos de Bariloche, assumes full identity, reunites with family, actually his own wife and daughter with manufactured histories. Phase 7, Cargo Retrieval 1946-1948. Separate team, using coordinates provided by Borman staff, retrieves containers. Documents and technology are distributed to various recipients. Some material goes to Argentine military contacts. Some is sold to interested foreign governments. Some is retained by Nazi network for future leverage. Phase 8, Cover Maintenance 1946-1982. Wilhelm Bernhardt lives as Heinz Schaffer for 37 years. Maintains low profile, works as technical consultant. Receives regular payments from Swiss accounts. Never returns to Germany, avoiding potential exposure. Publishes carefully sanitized memoir in 1952 that reinforces false narrative. Dies in 1982, taking full knowledge of substitution to his grave. The network's success depended on multiple organizations cooperating without full knowledge of the complete operation. Norwegian collaborators didn't know about the Argentine reception network. Argentine officials didn't know about the Swiss banking infrastructure. Each component operated independently, connected only through coded communications and authentication protocols. This compartmentalization meant that even when authorities investigated individual elements, tracking a suspicious bank account here, questioning a cooperative official there, they could never assemble the complete picture. Until U-977 was discovered, its steel hull preserving secrets for 79 years. Wilhelm Bernhardt's life as Heinz Schaffer from 1945 to 1982 remains partially obscured, but evidence gathered from banking records, property transactions, witness interviews, and correspondence provides a fragmentary portrait. Bernhardt purchased a modest home at Cal Bishtet 342, San Carlos de Bariloche in April 1947. The property, valued at 18,000 pesos, approximately $4,500 USD then, featured 3 bedrooms, a workshop, and a small garden overlooking Nahuelhuapi Lake. Neighbors interviewed in 2025 remember Senor Schaffer as quiet, polite, and intensely private. He was always working on something in his workshop, recalls Maria Gonzalez, now 87, who lived next door from 1950 to 1965. Mechanical things. He repaired watches, built radios, helped people fix their automobiles. He was talented with machinery, very precise in his work, but he never talked about the war. If you asked, he would just say he wanted to forget those years. Tax records show Bernhardt operated a small technical consulting business, Schaffer Ingenieria, providing services to local industries, primarily ski resort equipment maintenance and hydroelectric plant consulting. His income was modest but steady, 12,18000 pesos annually through the 1950s, equivalent to middle-class professional earnings. But banking records tell a different story. Between 1948 and 1968, Heinz Schaffer's account at Banco de la Provincia received quarterly deposits from Swiss accounts totaling approximately 240,000 Swiss francs, roughly $55,000 USD over 20 years, equivalent to $650,000 in 2024 currency. These payments suggest ongoing compensation from the escape network, payment for his role in the operation, or perhaps silence money ensuring he maintained his cover. Bernhardt's wife, Erika née Hoffmann, arrived in Argentina in December 1946. Her immigration papers claim she fled Germany after her family was killed in Soviet occupation. But genealogical research by the Argentine forensic anthropology team reveals a different story. Erika Bernhardt, her real maiden name was Erika Stahls, was married to Wilhelm Bernhardt in April 1942 in Heidelberg. Their daughter, Greta, was born February 1943. Erika knew she was participating in identity fraud. Evidence suggests she was briefed before traveling to Argentina. but she maintained the deception perfectly. Letters she wrote to relatives in Germany between 1948 and 1955, intercepted by West German intelligence and archived in BND files, use coded language that refers to our situation and maintaining the arrangement. One letter, dated March 8, 1953, is particularly revealing. Greta asks questions about her grandfather sometimes. I tell her what we agreed to tell her, but I worry that as she grows older, she'll see inconsistencies. Wilhelm says we must never deviate from the story, no matter what. The alternative is unthinkable. Greta's childhood, by her own account, was normal on the surface. School, friends, holidays. But she remembers oddities: her father's refusal to be photographed with other German immigrants, his sudden departures on business trips that lasted weeks, locked cabinets in his workshop she was forbidden to open. Once, when I was about 12, I found a photograph in my father's desk, Greta recalled during her November 2024 interview. It showed him, or someone who looked like him, in an SS uniform. When I asked about it, he took the photograph, said I was mistaken, that it was a costume from a play. But I saw the fear in his eyes. I knew I'd discovered something I shouldn't have seen. I never asked again. Bernhardt wasn't isolated in his deception. Evidence suggests a network of perhaps 30-40 individuals living in the Barilach area under false identities, all connected through informal social structures. They would gather occasionally, always privately, never in public venues, at homes scattered around the region. These meetings were ostensibly social events for German immigrants, but witness accounts suggest they served another purpose: coordination, mutual support, and maintaining counterintelligence awareness. Hans Ulrich Rudel, the decorated Luftwaffe pilot who openly lived in Argentina under his real name — he wasn't wanted for war crimes — was connected to this circle. Rudel maintained a home in Barilach and operated an aviation consulting business. He knew Bernhardt's true identity. Documents found in Rudel's papers after his death in 1982 include a coded address book with Schaffer equals Bernhardt noted beside the telephone number. Other members of this shadow community included Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, who lived in Bolivia under the name Klaus Altmann from 1951 to 1983, Joseph Mengele, who periodically visited Argentina and Paraguay until his death in Brazil in 1979, and Erich Priebke, who lived openly in Barilach until his extradition to Italy in 1995. These men represented different tiers of Nazi war criminals. Some were wanted for specific atrocities, Barbie, Mengele. Others were considered ordinary military personnel who served in criminal organizations, Priebke. And some, like Bernhardt, had successfully assumed false identities that shielded them from investigation entirely. In 1952, Wilhelm Bernhardt, using his Heinz Schaffer identity, published a memoir titled U-977, 66 Days Underwater, original Spanish title, U-Boat 977. The book describes the official version of U-977's voyage, departing Norway in May 1945, crossing the Atlantic, and surrendering in Argentina in August 1945. The memoir is carefully constructed fiction. It includes enough accurate technical detail about submarine operations to convince readers of authenticity, while omitting or fabricating every element related to the cargo, the identity substitution, and the real U-977's fate. Literary analysis conducted in 2025 by Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic linguistics expert from Oxford University, identifies multiple discrepancies. The author demonstrates competent but not expert knowledge of submarine operations. His descriptions of technical procedures are generic, lacking the intuitive detail you'd expect from someone with 2 years of combat command experience. Additionally, the emotional tone when describing family tragedy is oddly detached, consistent with someone recounting a story they learned secondhand rather than lived personally. The memoir served multiple purposes. It reinforced the false narrative for historical records. It provided Bernhardt with legitimate income. The book sold moderately well. And most critically, it inoculated him against suspicion. People who read the book assumed they knew everything about Schaffer's wartime experience, making them less likely to ask probing questions. By the 1970s, Wilhelm Bernhardt was in his 50s, the Nazi era receding into historical distance. His quarterly payments from Swiss accounts ceased in 1968, likely because Martin Bormann, who controlled those funds, died in Paraguay in 1959, though his death wasn't confirmed until 1998. Bernhardt relied increasingly on his pension from the German government, ironically, awarded based on Heinz Schaffer's naval service, and income from his workshop. He developed cardiovascular disease in the mid-1970s. Medical records from Hospital Zonal Bariloche show treatments for angina and hypertension between 1976 and 1982. On March 12, 1982, Wilhelm Bernhardt suffered a massive heart attack at his home. He was pronounced dead at 14:20 hours. He was 62 years old, though his death certificate, issued under the name Heinz Schaffer, incorrectly lists his age as 61, based on the real Schaffer's birth year of 1921 rather than Bernhardt's 1920. He was buried in Cementerio Municipal de Bariloche under a simple headstone. Heinz Schaffer, 1920-11982, Kapitänleutnant, Kriegsmarine, Descanse en Paz. Erika died in 1995. Greta continued living in Argentina, never suspecting until 2024 that her entire identity was constructed from lies. The unanswered questions. Despite extensive investigation, critical gaps remain. What happened to the real Heinz Schaffer? The skeleton found in U-977's captain's quarters suggests he remained with the submarine after the cargo was offloaded and the crew evacuated. But why? Was he forced to stay as punishment for some perceived failure? Did he volunteer, believing he was protecting his family by maintaining the deception? Or was he simply executed once he completed his mission, his body left in the submarine to ensure the secret remained sealed? The journal's final entry, "History will record my death, but I will live to see my children again," suggests Schaffer believed he would be retrieved, that remaining with the submarine was temporary. But no retrieval ever came. He died there, either from exposure, starvation, or deliberate abandonment, locked inside the steel tomb he'd piloted across an ocean. What became of the technology and documents? The 11 containers held intelligence valuable enough to justify elaborate escape operations. Some material was certainly used. Argentina's post-war military modernization programs show German influence in jet engine development and submarine design. But much remains unaccounted for. Where are the documents now? Were they destroyed, sold to other nations, still hidden in some forgotten archive? How many others? If 127 individuals were documented in the Valkyrie program, how many more participated in similar schemes without being documented? The identity substitution required real officers to disappear. How many other submarines, ships, or aircraft lie hidden with their crews still aboard, their identities stolen by SS officers who lived comfortable post-war lives? Did anyone in authority know? The sophistication of Bernhardt's deception suggests he received ongoing support. Did elements within Argentine intelligence know his true identity? Did Western intelligence services discover the truth and choose not to expose it because Bernhardt provided valuable information about other Nazi escapees? Or did everyone simply accept the cover story because investigating further raised uncomfortable questions about how many war criminals their governments had inadvertently protected? These questions haunt investigators as profoundly as the image of Heinz Schaffer's skeleton, alone in the darkness, still seated at his captain's station, waiting for a rescue that never came. The U-977 discovery forces confrontation with uncomfortable truths about justice, accountability, and the complexity of moral judgment in wartime. Heinz Schaffer was not, by available evidence, a war criminal in the conventional sense. His service records show no involvement in atrocities. He commanded a submarine that attacked military and merchant targets, actions considered legitimate warfare under international law, even when those actions resulted in civilian deaths. Unlike concentration camp guards, SS execution squads, or administrators of genocide programs, Schaffer was a combat officer performing military duties. Yet he became complicit in far darker crimes by agreeing to participate in the Valkyrie network, by transporting documents related to human medical experimentation, by facilitating the escape of genuine war criminals, by helping preserve Nazi technical intelligence that could empower future fascist movements. Schaffer crossed a moral line that cannot be justified by claims of following orders. His motivation, the death of his family, invites empathy. Any person who lost their spouse and children might become capable of morally questionable actions in pursuit of survival or revenge. But empathy does not equal exoneration. Thousands of German soldiers lost families to Allied bombing, yet chose to surrender honorably rather than participate in criminal escape networks. Wilhelm Bernhardt's case presents different ethical dimensions. He was an SS officer, though his specific duties remain unclear. Did he personally participate in war crimes? Documents don't provide clear answers, but he willingly assumed a false identity, lived on money stolen from Holocaust victims, and maintained deception that helped protect genuine murderers from justice. Should he be judged as harshly as someone who personally killed concentration camp prisoners? That question divides historians and ethicists. Some argue that facilitators, those who provided logistics, intelligence, and cover for Nazi crimes, bear substantial moral responsibility, even if they never personally pulled a trigger or operated a gas chamber. Others contend that individual moral culpability requires direct participation in violent acts. The Argentine government's complicity raises national accountability questions. Juan Perón's administration knowingly harbored Nazi fugitives, accepting them as immigrants despite strong evidence of their wartime crimes. Argentina benefited from German technical expertise, aerospace engineers, weapons designers, intelligence officers who contributed to post-war military modernization. Was this pragmatic realpolitik? Nations do what serves their interests, regardless of abstract justice. Or was it moral bankruptcy, privileging technological gain over accountability for genocide? Similar questions apply to other nations. The United States recruited Nazi scientists through Operation Paperclip, granting immunity from prosecution to engineers and researchers who advanced American missile, aerospace, and chemical weapons programs. The Soviet Union did likewise with German specialists captured in the East. Western intelligence services employed former Nazi intelligence officers as sources on Soviet activities during the Cold War. Every major power compromised justice for perceived strategic advantage. This reality doesn't excuse individual nations' actions, but it does contextualize them within a broader pattern of post-war moral compromise. Lost in discussions of submarines, secret networks, and technological intelligence are the millions of victims who received no justice. Jewish families murdered in concentration camps. Soviet prisoners of war worked to death in forced labor. Polish civilians executed in reprisal operations. Disabled individuals killed in euthanasia programs. The list extends beyond comprehension. For those victims and their descendants, every Nazi who escaped prosecution represents justice denied. The fact that Wilhelm Bernhardt lived comfortably in Argentina for 37 years, collecting pension payments, enjoying his family, dying peacefully of natural causes, while his victims were murdered, burned, buried in mass graves, constitutes an obscenity that no historical explanation can adequately address. Dr. Miriam Feldstein of the Simon Wiesenthal Center articulates this position forcefully. We must never allow historical fascination with the operational sophistication of escape networks to overshadow the fundamental moral fact. These were criminals fleeing accountability for the murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others. Every day a Nazi war criminal lived free was another day justice was denied to their victims. Yet even within victims' descendants, perspectives vary. Some families prioritize accountability. They want identification, prosecution, and punishment for perpetrators, regardless of how much time has passed. Others prioritize truth. They want to know what happened, where their relatives died, who was responsible, even if prosecution is no longer possible due to death or age. Greta Bernhardt Schaffer represents an unexpected victim category, descendants of perpetrators who inherited lies. She lived 81 years believing a false identity, only to discover in 2024 that her father was an SS officer who stole a dead man's name. Should she bear moral responsibility for crimes she didn't commit and didn't know about? Does she owe anything to the memory of the real Heinz Schaffer, the man whose identity her father stole? These questions resist simple answers. The U-977 discovery occurred 80 years after the war's end, beyond the lifespan of most participants. Wilhelm Bernhardt died in 1982, escaping any possibility of prosecution. Other network members are likewise deceased or, in rare cases, aged beyond capacity for trial. This temporal distance transforms the nature of accountability. Criminal justice, prosecution, imprisonment, punishment becomes impossible. What remains is historical justice, establishing truth, documenting crimes, ensuring accurate historical record, and educating future generations. Is historical justice sufficient? For some, yes. Knowing the truth, even if punishment is impossible, provides a measure of closure. For others, no. Without tangible consequences for perpetrators, the concept of justice becomes meaningless. The case also raises questions about institutional responsibility. Should Germany provide compensation to the real Heinz Schaffer's descendants, acknowledging that Nazi institutions hijacked his identity? Should Argentina formally apologize for harboring escaped Nazis? Should Switzerland account for banking services that facilitated criminal escape networks? These questions extend beyond individual guilt to collective responsibility, not in the sense that entire nations are guilty, but that institutions created systems that enabled crimes, and those institutions' successor organizations bear some duty of acknowledgement and remediation. A subtle danger in narratives like U-977's story is the seductive quality of operational competence. The escape network demonstrated remarkable planning, logistics, security, and execution. From a purely technical standpoint, Valkyrie was sophisticated, perhaps one of the most successful covert evacuation operations in history. That sophistication invites a kind of reluctant admiration, the way one might appreciate the engineering of a weapon while deploring its use. But admiring operational effectiveness risks normalizing the underlying criminality. We must resist the temptation to separate the impressive planning from the evil purpose. They are inseparable. The network's sophistication was directed entirely toward helping war criminals escape justice. That purpose taints every element of the operation. The U-977 case resonates with contemporary issues. How do we balance justice with practical limitations? How do we handle historical crimes when perpetrators are dead? What responsibility do nations bear for their past government's actions? How do we prevent historical narratives from sanitizing or romanticizing criminal behavior? These questions apply to investigations of other 20th century atrocities. Stalin's purges, Mao's Cultural Revolution, Pol Pot's killing fields, Rwanda's genocide, the Balkans conflicts. In each case, the passage of time complicates but does not eliminate the moral obligation to establish truth and seek accountability. The U-977 discovery demonstrates that historical secrets eventually surface. Steel corrodes. Documents emerge from archives. Forensic technology advances. What seems successfully hidden for decades can be exposed in a single dive, one document discovery, one DNA test. This reality should serve as warning to modern perpetrators. Time does not guarantee impunity. Technology continually expands our capacity to investigate the past. Today's war criminals may believe they've successfully concealed their crimes, but they cannot predict what investigative capabilities will exist in 50, 80, or 100 years. March 17, 2026, Golfo San Matías, Argentina. 2 years after the discovery, the Argentine government has transformed the U-977 site into an underwater memorial. Divers can visit the submarine in its canyon grave, observing but not disturbing the wreck. A museum on the nearby coast displays recovered artifacts, documents, and photographs, telling the story of Heinz Schaffer, Wilhelm Bernhardt, and the vast deception that concealed truth for 8 decades. The museum's centerpiece is a reconstructed timeline showing 2 parallel lives, the real Schaffer's journey ending in that steel tomb, and Bernhardt's comfortable existence using the stolen identity. Visitors walk through the exhibition seeing photographs of both men, reading their letters, examining the evidence that unraveled the lie. On the museum's final wall, a question is engraved in Spanish, German, and English. How many more secrets remain hidden in the depths? Dr. Elena Vargas stands on the observation deck, overlooking the canyon where U-977 rests. The ocean stretches to the horizon, vast and inscrutable. She considers how many other submarines might lie hidden, not just German vessels, but Japanese, Italian, perhaps even Allied craft engaged in classified missions whose secrecy was maintained by allowing crews to disappear into history's shadows. The ocean keeps secrets with incomparable patience. It corrodes, conceals, and crushes evidence until only the most durable materials survive. Steel hulls, gold bars, and the bones of men who died far from home, their names stolen, their stories rewritten. But the ocean also preserves. In the cold, dark silence beneath the waves, without oxygen to fuel decomposition, without light to fade ink, the truth waits. It waited 80 years for someone to find U-977. How many other truths are waiting? What other steel tombs hold skeletons of men whose identities were hijacked so that criminals could live free? Greta Bernhardt Schaffer visits the museum on opening day. She stands before her father's photograph, the man she called father for 39 years, the SS officer who stole a naval officer's identity and lived a lie until his death. Beside it, a photograph of the real Heinz Schaffer, the man she never knew, the man whose name she carried without understanding. "I don't know how to mourn," she tells a reporter. "Do I mourn the man who raised me, who was kind to me despite his crimes? Do I mourn the real Schaffer who died alone in that submarine? Do I mourn the person I thought I was, the identity that was built on lies?" She has no answers, neither does anyone else. The U-977 discovery resolved historical questions, but created new personal tragedies. Descendants discovering their ancestors were not who they claimed. Families learning their histories were fabricated. Communities confronting the reality that people they trusted and respected were living under stolen identities. Truth has a cost. Sometimes that cost is paid by people who committed no crime, who inherited only the consequences of others' deceptions. As the sun sets over the Patagonian coast, painting the ocean in colors of rust and blood, Vargas considers the strange circularity of justice. Heinz Schaffer tried to escape his past by delivering cargo and disappearing into supposed death. Instead, he became a permanent witness, his skeleton a silent testimony to crimes that outlasted all the perpetrator's careful planning. Wilhelm Bernhardt tried to escape judgment by assuming a false identity and living quietly. Instead, he ensured that 80 years later, his deception would be exposed completely, his true identity revealed, his SS service documented for history. The very escape he orchestrated became the evidence that convicted him in history's court, even though no criminal court ever had the chance. Perhaps this is the only justice available for crimes committed so long ago by people now dead. The truth, not imprisonment, not punishment, not revenge, just truth, documented, preserved, and transmitted to future generations who must decide what lessons to draw from the evidence. The question engraved on the museum wall haunts everyone who encounters this story. How many more secrets remain hidden? Conservative estimates suggest at least 30–40 individuals from the Valkyrie dossiers were never identified or tracked, men who successfully assumed false identities and disappeared into the post-war world, taking their secrets to graves marked with names that weren't their own. Their children and grandchildren live today, unaware their family histories are fabrications. Other submarines fled in 1945, their fates officially listed as presumed sunk or lost with all hands. How many of those vessels lie hidden like U-977, deliberate concealment rather than combat loss? How many commanders became guardians of cargo they transported, dying alone in steel coffins while imposters lived their lives? The historical record is incomplete. Archives remain classified. Technology continues advancing, enabling investigators to solve mysteries that seemed forever sealed. Perhaps in another 80 years, someone will discover another submarine, another cache of documents, another skeleton that doesn't match dental records. Perhaps they'll unravel another elaborate deception, exposing another network of lies that seemed impenetrable. Or perhaps some secrets will remain sealed forever, submarines crushed by ocean pressure, documents reduced to pulp, bones scattered by currents, truth lost to time's erosion. The ocean doesn't judge. It simply keeps what it's given, releasing secrets only when pressure, current, and chance align to bring them back to the surface. U-977 kept its secret for 79 years. When Elena Vargas's sonar detected that anomaly on March 17, 2024, it wasn't triumph of investigative determination or technological superiority. It was accident, a research vessel happening to pass over that specific stretch of seabed at the right angle, at the right depth, with the right equipment. History is full of such accidents. Construction workers digging foundations and discovering mass graves, farmers plowing fields and unearthing documents, hikers stumbling on crashed aircraft in remote mountains. Truth emerges not because we're clever enough to find it, but because concealment, no matter how sophisticated, is ultimately temporary. Time and chance unravel all secrets eventually. As darkness falls over Golfo San Matias, lights illuminate the underwater canyon. Divers descend with waterproof cameras, tourists watching from boats above. U-977 has become a memorial, a museum, a warning carved in steel and rust. Inside the submarine in the captain's quarters, the skeleton remains in place. The real Heinz Schaffer, 25 years old when he died, father of children he never saw again, husband of a wife murdered by bombs, officer who followed orders that cost him everything, guardian of secrets that outlived everyone who knew him. His bones will rest there permanently, preserved as part of the memorial. The Argentine government decided against removal, leaving him with his submarine seemed, somehow, appropriate. He delivered it to this position. He remained with it to the end. In death, as in life, he fulfills his mission. Wilhelm Bernhardt's grave, meanwhile, has been exhumed. DNA testing confirmed the body buried as Heinz Schaffer was indeed Wilhelm Bernhardt. His remains have been reburied in an unmarked location, his stolen headstone removed, his name struck from the memorial cemetery's records. 2 men, 2 graves, one known, preserved, honored as historical testament, one unknown, unmarked, erased as consequence of deception. Perhaps that's the final justice available, truth preserved, lies erased, and the historical record corrected even when criminal prosecution is no longer possible. The ocean holds its remaining secrets closer now, aware that technology advances, that investigators improve, that the past refuses to stay buried. Somewhere in cold depths, another submarine might rest, another commander might wait, another truth might remain sealed. But the ocean can't hold secrets forever. Eventually, inevitably, steel corrodes, sediment shifts. Someone passes overhead with sonar, magnetometer, or curious eye, and what was hidden becomes exposed. The question isn't whether secrets will surface. The question is when, and who will be alive to face the truth when it emerges. Sometimes the ocean keeps secrets for 80 years. Sometimes it keeps them for centuries, but it never keeps them forever.